Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Equine Episode Examination, where today we'll be discussing the newest MLP Season 7 episode from this past weekend, Triple Threat. A Spike episode, everyone's favorite, yay! Right? So, if this is your first time...
It was a decent Spike episode, though.
I guess it depends on who you ask. But I guess that's like that for any MLP episode. But anyway, if it's your first time joining us here on Equine Episode Examination, we do record these episodes live. If you aren't watching live, we record them live on Tuesdays, usually at 5 p.m. around there, maybe a little later than that, like today, depending on real life. But yeah, around 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time is when we record these over at CinemaQuestria.com. So if you do want to come and join in the discussion on this, that's the time and place to go. Or if you're watching this somewhere else live on YouTube or somewhere else other than our site, and you want to join in on the live chat, make sure to go to CinemaQuestria.com/stream. You get the stream embed there. You can join our Discord chat here or our Legacy IRC chat, and join in on the discussion. We'd love to hear what your opinion is on the episode, especially episodes like this one, which do have a lot of opinionated opinions on them. Pretty much what we're going to do, if you've never joined us before for one of these, is we discuss the episode, give our thoughts of it, our opinions on it. It's mostly like a group discussion of it, so it's not just one of us giving a review, kind of just discuss each other's opinions on it, both within the call here and as well as with everyone in the chat. Anyone's welcome to bring up any points they want to make on it. We do try to keep us slightly organized most of the time. We'll start with story and characters, and then more broad stuff about the episode, and then work our way into more specifics about it. Just to quickly introduce us, a few of us that are here in the call today. I'm Rain Shadow, and there's a few other people here as well.
Hey guys, it's Mr. Ben.
And this is Jay Smith.
There he is.
Yep.
And so we'll be on the call here in addition to everyone else that is chatting away in the live chat room here on Discord. So with that, all the introductions out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. What were everyone's initial thoughts, initial opinions on Triple Threat?
Definitely nice to see Ember again. Wasn't expecting to see her after,
twice this season.
Yeah, technically. Well, technically the first time we saw was more of a, not so much of a flashback, but kind of like a...
It wasn't real.
Yeah.
But she was there and she did talk.
Yes, true. As well as seeing Thorax again, too, so soon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So.
Yeah, it was. I think it was an okay episode. Wasn't the best episode out there. It wasn't a Gauntlet of Fire episode for Spike, but I thought it was really enjoyable. It was they took sort of a common trope and kind of amped it up a little bit, and really put the pressure on Spike there. For it, I thought it was really enjoyable and just a kind of a funny episode to watch. Sort of all Spike and the rest of them all sort of deal with it and stuff. I mean, like I said, the basic plot of it is something that's pretty overdone, but they made pretty good use of it, and I thought it was at least an enjoyable episode for that. Like Mr. Ben said, it was great, all the continuity again, and seeing Ember and Thorax again. It's something I think we've seen a lot more in more recent seasons now, where we'll be introduced to some new characters and they'll actually return, not 6 seasons later. I mean, earlier seasons, I feel like characters were introduced and then not seen for a long time, and it's something we saw really starting in season 5, I guess, where we saw like Gilda and some other characters,
little Strongheart
and stuff. Yeah, and we what was this? Oh yeah, so like season 5 when we started getting like we got to see Gilda again, but also when we got to see a lot of the newer characters that were introduced, like the Yaks, and we saw them again this season or last season where Ember and Thorax were introduced, and here we see them again in this episode. So it's nice to see a lot of these newer characters that may have one point seemed like they could have been one shots actually coming back and playing more of a part in the show. And we've already seen that with Thorax. Thorax played a little bit bigger part of last season, of course, being in the finale. But seeing Ember come back as well was a nice addition. And yeah, so starting with the writing and the story of the episode, this episode was written by Joshua Hamilton. He's a new writer for this season. This is his second episode that he's written this season. Previously wrote Parental Guidance earlier in this season, and of course he's one of the two writers this season that we've had that worked on previously Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, and more recently the new Netflix Voltron series. So definitely some of my favorite shows there, especially with the Avatar related ones. It was great seeing him on the show and having him write multiple episodes this season, especially since we've had so many new writers this season. It's almost like almost every writer is someone new, and the other ones, with the exception of last week's episode, were writers that have not really been around that long. I mean, even Joanna Christine only joined in season 5. So it's again nice to see this kind of fresh perspective on it. So anyway, what did everyone think about the story and the writing of the episode?
I got the clear Avatar influence when Dragon Lord Emperor was saying that they settle their differences with feats of strength and fire duels. Now I just have like mental images of like Ember just getting involved in Agni Kais essentially.
Yeah, it's like a Fire Nation there meets like the air nomads or something like that with Thorax.
Great. Now I just have a mental image of Thorax being the Avatar, essentially, or at least the Airbender that Fire Lord Ember is trying to capture.
Yeah. I guess writing-wise, I thought it was pretty well written in terms of like I mentioned, the humor. It was very fun and entertaining episode for it. There's plenty to discuss when we get to Spike's character, but I think just overall, besides that character aspect, I think the humor and the story structure executed that sort of trope very well and in an entertaining way. It was definitely interesting to see this sort of halfway through the episode turn into a map episode, which it was quite the different, in many ways, quite the different episode for a map episode. Usually those have a very set formula in how they're executed with the whole episode revolving around the map and them going somewhere else, etc., etc. That was kind of thrown in here, and of course we get to see Spike actually get called by the map for the first time there. But go ahead.
I noticed there was like some people were like kind of mentioning how surprising that Spike would be called, since he wasn't even a pony. But Spike being a candidate to be called upon to solve a friendship problem is actually kind of easier to understand when you consider the fact that he's actually had a throne since the very beginning, since the thrones are directly connected to the cutie map. So it makes that Spike's a less surprising candidate than Starlight herself, since he was already connected to the map in a way.
Yep. And I still think all of the people who have been called from the map have some sort of connection to it, which makes sense. I think it would be a little weird if the map suddenly called like random ponies to do random stuff. It would be, at least right now, it kind of makes sense. You go into that territory, it starts getting kind of contrived and not making sense. Like Mr. Ben said in the show's logic, it makes sense that Spike would have a part, but since even though he doesn't have a cutie mark or anything like that, he's always had a chair there since the map was introduced. So at least we have some continuity there with him getting called. With Starlight, even though she obviously wasn't part of that map to begin with, she kind of ingrained herself into the map when she started messing around with time and doing this stuff with that map as well as she was the one that after the end of season 5 there, helped Twilight restart the map with that magic spell. So she's had some magical interaction with it, and at least that provides some explanation to why she would be called by the map as well, in addition to being being Twilight's pupil as well. Yeah, even Twilight kind of gave a little jab at that. Man, that's really reaching now. Certainly an interesting story concept in terms of, as I mentioned before, it's sort of a trope in terms of that, but the way they kind of did it was kind of nice. It was nice again seeing Ember and Thorax again, but having them both be in the same episode and be this source of conflict for Spike, where he's worried that these two different races are just not going to get along there, and he's worried that, as many people are when they have two friends, that worried that their two, the friends aren't going to get along with each other, and that's going to put stress on them, which is what Spike is worried about here. But they don't just kind of leave it at that. They keep upping sort of the fire under Spike's feet throughout. So it kind of just starts as, oops, I accidentally invited Thorax to Ponyville the same day as Ember. Uh-oh. This is going to be a wacky situation. And it starts that, but then they keep upping it to turn it kind of from this wacky, farce into more pressure on him when they start, introducing the friendship problem, and now Spike, in addition to keeping them apart, he's got to go and look to see what the friendship problem is and try and solve that. And then all the stuff that happens when they actually do meet, and the misunderstandings and sort of escalation into what Spike was actually fearing there, was interesting to see. It was better. I think it turned out better than if it would have just kind of left it at that original plot point when, just watching Spike fumble with those two things. They really gave him enough so it seemed like it was legitimately not Spike being incompetent again or anything like that. If they would have kept it just at that, then you could kind of say that, but now they're throwing so much stuff at him that I think he's kind of legitimately overwhelmed with all of that, which was nice, which was kind of a nice addition to it that would have made the episode not as good if they didn't put it in. I guess one of the other things I'll mention, kind of changing gears a little bit, but something that can tie into some other discussion before I forget, is the continuity of the episode, but more specifically how this is the second episode in a row here that has directly set up for a future episode, without getting too much into spoiler territory. Just based on the summaries and descriptions we know, we do know that there is an upcoming episode that revolves around what the CMC having a day camp sort of thing, like they mentioned in last week's episode. And in this episode here, Thorax is in Ponyville to try and legitimately bring up some concerns and problems he's having with Spike, and one of those problems is a rogue group of changelings who is refusing to switch over from feeding on love to feeding on friendship like they do now. So that is another episode that's supposedly coming up this season. So it's definitely interesting to see us not just having continuity kind of working backwards, but having some things like we had in season 4 in Three's a Crowd, where we're kind of with the Breezies and kind of setting up for future episodes as well. And it's really nice because it shows some good planning out of the season on the story editor's part to make sure all these different writers can get those kind of clues in. And I really enjoy that. I'm enjoying that setting up, and I'm looking to getting to those episodes as well and seeing how those play out.
I was really looking forward to seeing. I am really looking forward to seeing, I should say, how that's going to play out in the upcoming episodes, because Thorax really just gave us that hook that, hey, there are still some rogue changelings out there. So I'm like, okay, so this whole changeling threat isn't fully gone away yet.
Yep, definitely. Even if you haven't looked at some of the upcoming summaries, it's a pretty obvious sort of plant in the episode for a future episode.
Not to mention that Chrysalis is still out there at large as well. So.
Yeah, we'll see if she plays a part in anything or not. Part of me kind of hopes not, at least not this soon. I don't want to get too repetitive, but I guess we'll kind of see where they go with it. But yeah, again, this episode, in addition to setting up for future episodes, also just had a lot of continuity within it itself, which is something we've been really saying about almost every episode this season, and sort of what the writers and what Joanne and Christine are really putting into these episodes in terms of keeping continuity. We already mentioned, of course, Ember and Thorax both returning here in the episode. So both of those returning characters are really nice bits of continuity, and they play on stuff that have happened in past episodes with them, both including in terms of the Changelings' reformation and what Thorax is going through. Of course, it's also with the map as well, and yeah, all these other things. So it was really nice to see all these little bits of that continuity again throughout the episode, and not just kind of throwing continuity in as reference to kind of say, hey, the continuity. It's actually ingraining it into the episode structure again. It was certainly an interesting sort of layout for the plot and climax and resolution of it. And especially in terms of a map episode, when we normally, with a map episode, there's a friendship problem. It calls two ponies. They both have to work together using each of their unique abilities to solve the friendship problem, and then they solve it and everything's great. This one was definitely a little different, being that the friendship problem that the map was calling wound up being Spike's friendship problem, so they called Spike to solve his own friendship problem. And then the friendship problem sort of solved itself with with Ember and
without
Thorax.
Any input from him, no less.
Yeah, so I mean,
funny.
So I mean, he kind of, he kind of called. He's like, it's definitely weird. I mean, I guess you could say that he instilled friendship between Thorax and Ember by unknowingly and unwittingly calling them both at the same time to actually kind of meet and talk, where otherwise this would have never really happened. And while I don't think there necessarily would be any ill will between the changelings and the dragons, it's nice to sort of, again, have that not, shown to be not that way. But it certainly was interesting and different for a map episode when Spike more or less did nothing to solve the friendship problem, and more or less learned something himself for it. It was different for it. I'm not going to say I didn't like it. It is a little weird. It added some, adding that map element, it adds some necessary extra conflict for it, so Spike wasn't just kind of holding an idiot ball the entire time, and was more legitimately just kind of overwhelmed with trying to deal with all of these issues, that some of which he's caused and some of which he hasn't. So it did help in that aspect, but it was a little weird just being that it doesn't... Why the map called Spike when... it doesn't kind of fit within the rest of the map episodes.
It's funny because there are a lot of people saying that Spike really didn't do anything, and he technically did. It's just that the stuff that he did solve just wasn't related to the topic at hand.
It wasn't what the map wanted. I mean, let's make that official, that even though Spike didn't solve, the problem the map was trying to solve, he did legitimately solve 2 other friendship problems in the episode. So that's one more friendship problem than any of the other main 6 have solved in their respective map episodes. It just wasn't the correct friendship problem. So at the very least, I'm glad they stuck those in, because it continues the sort of stress they're putting on Spike in terms of what he has to what he has to do there, and what he has to deal with, and adds a little bit of comedy as well when the friendship problems he's trying to solve aren't the right ones. But more importantly, it does show that he is being competent in that aspect, because we always kind of talked about this before, Spike episodes where he's holding the idiot ball, or he's constantly learning a lesson over and over, or different lessons and never actually being competent in something. And then episodes like Gauntlet of Fire come along and actually show him to be very competent in what he's doing in the episode. This one, obviously, he's having some issues with kind of the problems he's caused and his worries about if his friends will get along or not, which you can classify as legitimate worries or not, depending on your opinion on the matter. But at the very least, they did show him legitimately quickly solving 2 other friendship problems in it, to show that he is a good part of the main 6's team, and obviously has learned a lot from Twilight herself, that he can go out there and actually help people having problems like that all on his own. Even if that wasn't the one that he was supposed to solve in the episode, he still did that in the episode, and I think that's important to show for his character.
Yeah, it shows that he's willing to, do whatever it takes to figure out what the problem is. It's you gotta hand it the little guy a little. He's willing to do what he thinks is right. Now, obviously, he was more just kind of a little over enthusiastic, I think, probably. But then again, he was also really stressed out at the time, because I've got 2 VIPs here. I have to make sure that I'm spending enough time with them both, and I don't want them to, clash together and possibly cause an even bigger issue. So that's why I want to try to keep these guys as far apart as possible. And now I've got this issue dropped in my lap on top of this. So it kind of makes sense that, Spike wouldn't, think of his friendship problem being related to his primary issue, at least right off the top. Mm-hmm. So.
And I think it's something that's important to compare here in terms of how this in terms of how this episode handles writing for Spike's character, because of course Spike episodes, it's kind of a meme within this show that Spike episodes are horrible and he's always holding the idiot ball or incompetent with how he's handling situations. And I don't think there's really anything wrong with a character. Like, I think it's being a little too harsh in most of Spike's episodes. Yes, a lot of episodes he makes mistakes and then he learns from mistakes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Characters making mistakes are good. Characters learning from mistakes are good. We had a whole song about this last week. But I think the problem with Spike was there was just too many of that. Most of the other characters had episodes showing them growing or showing them being in charge of the situation, in addition to the episodes where they do something wrong and learn a lesson from it. With Spike, they sort of pigeonholed him into this little brother sort of archetype. And that's kind of why you get him being the butt monkey a lot of the group is because he's kind of always been in this like little brother role in the early seasons, and they weren't really sure where to go from that. So whenever we did get an episode that they wanted to focus on Spike, they'd always try to build his character by making him mess up and learn something and grow from that, which is okay. But the problem was always they just did it too much. Every single episode that was a Spike focused episode, he fucks something up and does something wrong, and it just made him seem very incompetent when you look at it as a whole picture rather than just a single episode. I don't think any of the Spike episodes, with the exception of All's Well That Ends Well, were really that bad, in my opinion at least. It's just when you look at the whole package, I can kind of see where after some time it gets a low grading. And that's why I think some more recent episodes with Spike have been very refreshing. When we see something like in Gauntlet of Fire, where he's really in charge of the situation, doing his best. He's not messing up. He's being an active participant in the events of the episode and working hard at doing it. And it was a really different kind of Spike episode from what we've seen. This episode does go a little bit back to him making some mistakes. I don't think that's necessarily a wrong thing. I think it's important to have episodes where characters make mistakes and grow from them. Unfortunately, being that the history that Spike has, that does mean a lot of people are going to look at this episode, see him screwing up again, and think, oh, this episode's horribly written. We're going back to the old Spike. I'm not going to necessarily subscribe to that. Like I said, I do think that it's important to still have episodes like this. Hopefully still mixed in with episodes where Spike is being, competent in a situation or leading a situation versus following for it. But I'm not going to knock this episode for that. And like I said, while I do think he is having some issues at the beginning where obviously where he just doesn't know what to do with, accidentally inviting two friends on the same day. Oh no. Like I said, when they start adding that map and stuff, he's legitimately getting overwhelmed with too much, and it's understandable why he's overwhelmed. And like Mr. Ben was saying, now in addition to all these other things that are really on top of me, now I gotta deal with this thing too, and we're trying to keep these two people apart, and with Twilight and Starlight, and trying to help, and yeah, I think that saved that episode in my eyes, and in the end, he knew what he was doing. I think the most important part is I think he was very aware of the situation the entire time. He was screwing up, but he was aware that things were messing up pretty bad. You can look at other episodes that people have problems with, like Spike at Your Service, which I really don't mind that much, but I can understand why people might have some problems, because throughout that entire episode, Spike is very blissfully unaware of sort of Applejack doesn't want him doing this and why. And he's unaware of the problems he's causing, and the messes he's causing in that episode. He's very unaware of it, and it can be a little weird to see that. This episode, at the whole time, he knows that he's caused a problem, and he's just working his best to try and solve it. And then more and more stuff gets put on his plate over and over, and he's just doing his best. He's going out there, he's solving two friendship problems at the same time, and still trying to figure out what he's doing this while still keeping his other two friends apart. Yes, he's making mistakes, but he's not doing it incompetently or doing it without being aware that he's making the mistakes. Even in the end, he knows he messes up. He's apologizing right away. He's very regretful of it. He knows exactly what he did wrong. When Ember and Thorax come to confront him, he's already aware of the mistakes he's made, and that and learn from them. He isn't being told to learn it or told the lesson. He's already learned it himself. And I think that's important for lessons, for episodes like this, when you're having a character make a mistake. Even Princess Spike was a little bit more like this episode, I think, where he was making a lot of mistakes, but a lot of the mistakes he was making, he knew he was just doing his best to try and do it, and then he kind of went a little too, a little overboard with it. I think I mentioned this back when we did our Princess Spike Triple E all the way back in the day, where I actually thought that was a good Spike episode with one problem. I think that it was okay to show him trying to his best to help Twilight. He thought he was being helpful. He thought he was trying to help Twilight so she can get some rest and do this other thing. He was aware of mistakes he was making. He was doing everything with really good intentions, and things weren't working out because he didn't have that leadership experience, and it was something that was the lesson for him. The one problem I had with that episode was when he starts abusing the power and he starts letting it go to his head and like starts like doing all this thing by order of the princess, like getting massages and stuff. That's what irked me about that episode. I thought that kind of killed a lot of what they were setting up in terms of what Spike was doing and what he was learning in that episode. He wasn't just going out there and doing his best to try and help Twilight and making mistakes along the way, or knowing now he's actually abusing it. I think it's a similar problem to what I have, not quite as anywhere near as bad, but it's a similar problem to what I had with Owl's Well that ends well. With the exception is that was one little scene in Spike at Your Service that was like that. Just one tiny little scene that was like that. Or Owl's Well that ends well was the entire episode. So I think I can see where people's problems with that episode come from. I don't think, since it was just that one scene that was really problematic, I didn't let that get to me as much. But otherwise, I think it was similar to this episode. This episode was just better executed and didn't have that kind of scene in it. There was no scene where Spike was like that. He was legitimately trying his best the entire time, and knowing he knew he was making mistakes. But I don't think that's a flaw with the episode. That's a flaw with those ponies. But, that's okay. It's okay for those ponies to, have flaws and be making mistakes. I agree with you that a lot of them were trying to get Twilight to solve petty problems and problems they could have worked out themselves and they didn't need to go to the top to the princess. But I'm not going to blame that on the episode or the writing. I think that was intentional. Yeah, and like DM12 said, I mean, yeah, that was that one scene soured it, but then right after that scene, the episode went back to normal. It was just that scene was really out of place. Only because Spike was too afraid to kind of stand up and like tell her the truth, though, Mr. Ben, when she started like gnawing on the.
That's true.
On the. And Starlight as well. He should have just said, "No, that's just the castle's made out of crystal. You probably shouldn't eat it. Ponies won't like that." But since they didn't tell her that, she just thinks that's normal, and then she starts smashing Derpy's muffin on the wall.
I'm kind of a little surprised that Darby didn't try to smash her in response.
I've seen some really good GIF edits of that, of Derpy just flipping the fuck out.
you could say that Amber was eating Twilight out of house and home in this episode.
Yeah, literally. Stream delay note: JE did say that before Technotron did. Anything else for story and writing? I think there's some other things to say, but they kind of go with characters, so I'm just thinking we kind of officially move on to characters here.
I really can't think of anything.
Yeah, so I think one of the cool things was a little bit is what they did with Ember and Thorax in this episode, both in terms of fleshing out their personalities a little bit more, but also kind of allowing them each other to teach each other a lesson in that final scene, where Ember and Thorax pretty much have the opposite problem, and they're both able to use their strengths to help the other one out. Thorax needs to be a little more assertive, like Fluttershy. Maybe not on Fluttershy levels back in season 1, but he needs to be a little bit more assertive with his leadership position. He's very friendly. He relates really well, and I'm sure his I don't even know what to call it. The changelings. I'm sure most of the changelings, with the exception of those few stray ones, really appreciate him for that and relate well to him for that and like him as a leader because of how nice he is and relatable and easygoing he is. The problem comes is when you don't have people that want to, don't want to play by the rules and are being more rogue, like we have apparently in the Changeling Kingdom right now. And he doesn't have that assertiveness to really step up and stand up against them and say no or speak up for himself or enforce those rules. So he's really good. He's a really good leader in terms of relating to other people there, but not so much in terms of when those people don't want to cooperate. Ember has pretty much the opposite problem, where she's very much authoritarian leader there in the Dragon Kingdom, but isn't really relating well to the people she's ruling or the ponies in this case when she comes to Ponyville as well. And she's sort of just, leading by fire and fury versus, leading in better ways or understanding people's concerns or differences, etc., etc. And so it was really cool to get to see both of them with such different leadership styles there, and seeing each of them in the end really being able to come together and help each other, with Thorax being able to tell, to get Ember how to see how her constituents might, the people she's ruling over, might see her being how she's acting, and with Ember being able to help Thorax realize that he really needs to step up and actually say, and stand up to the people, and really enforce the rules and enforce his leadership sometimes. And I think with Ember, it's also along the lines of she wasn't really expressing her feelings that well, because dragons don't do that. But by not expressing her feelings or opinions directly, she's having some communication problems with the rest of the dragons as well. And we see that at the end of the episode where we see Ember really try to express her feelings to Spike at the end, and with hilarious results, as well as Thorax trying to be more assertive as well with Spike. But I think that was one of my favorite things, is that, Spike didn't solve the problem. They kind of solved their own problems, but I did like seeing that. I liked seeing these two different characters from these two different sides of the world there, pretty much, being able to come together and help each other out with their different leadership styles and be able to, see each other. It was a nice little message about that there, and something Spike really didn't expect and feared wouldn't happen.
I'm gonna say, yeah, I figured that anything in regards to like any sort of a major conflict between the two of them really wouldn't have happened, mainly because of the fact that we kind of know that the show sort of really wouldn't go so far as to actually create like a major conflict. Despite the fact that we have had, teasings of this sort of thing before with Pinkie Pie and the Yaks, and what else? Um, we've had stuff like this kind of dangled before us. But either way, I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to see that I was like, okay, cool. I kind of figured that Thorax and Ember would probably hit it off somewhat okay. Yeah, they're sure they did have a bit of um, a minor scuffle, kind of like right there at the beginning. But once they both realized that the reason why they were ready to go after each other was for Spike's benefit, that was when they immediately de-escalated. And they, okay, let's figure out what the hell's going on with this.
I did really like that as well, because it shows how important Spike has been in terms of spreading friendship, in addition to the rest of the main six. And of course, we can see him called by the map in this episode as well. But these are two races in this world that really didn't understand friendship. And at all. You have the changelings, who were just literally a hive mind that were just feeding off of love, and listening to to Chrysalis, not thinking for themselves or caring about anything. And you have the dragons as well, who again don't really know the first thing about friendship, and it's all about being big and strong and fighting. I mean, the whole Gauntlet of Fire thing was all about that, in order to get the leadership position there. They don't know anything about friendship until Spike came along last season. It shows how important he was last season in Gauntlet of Fire and the times they are a changeling, where he was the star of both of those episodes. Very great Spike episodes where he was in charge and incompetent, and was able to implant that seed of friendship into both of those communities. And we see that come to a head here when Spike's fears seem to be coming true, and both Thorax and Ember are starting to fight. But they're fighting because they're defending their friend, and someone who is, their friend and means a lot to them. And it just shows, how much Spike has affected them for them to be able to do that in that scene. I think that's sort of a very subtle, important scene to the episode, and to Spike and his character and what he's done for these two leaders and for these two communities. And I think, another thing is, I don't want to... I know it's sort of obvious that Spike was sort of in the wrong, and he should have just kind of let what happened happen, and not try and, run through the gauntlet and try and keep these Ember and Thorax apart. But you can still kind of understand where his uncertainty is had, being that both of these are... Both of his friends here are from communities that, again, just sort of were introduced to friendship and more or less, quote-unquote, reformed in some way. And obviously both of them have, as he knows, have very different personalities and leadership styles. I think that's a very realistic sort of problem to have, having two different friends that are very different, and how they act and who they are and where they come from, and their personalities overall, and worrying that they're not gonna click, they're not gonna go along, and you want to keep both friends, so you never want to have those two friends together. And that's something that's, I think, really realistic. I mean, a lot of people will watch this and shit on Spike for being wrong, and he should have just let them. Obviously, he's just holding the idiot ball, and he should have just let them go. But I think that's a legitimate concern to have. I think that something could have happened. Maybe if they didn't get along, and then you have these two different factions here in Equestria that might have some issues. So I do think it is a legitimate concern that he has. I don't think he handled that concern the right way, but I do think this concern itself is at least a legitimate one. So on that subject, what did everyone think about Spike's characterization in the episode?
Spike was pretty much more or less the same as he always was, but it's kind of interesting to note that he basically got a lot of how can I say this? He's definitely been spending a lot of time around Twilight.
Yeah, I think that was one of the really fun things to see in the episode when he's trying to set up this day for Ember and trying to deal with all this stuff with what that's happening. We see him making a list. You see him, having very Twilight-esque kind of freakouts and stuff like that. You can definitely see a lot of Twilight that's rubbed off on him in this episode.
I kind of kept half expecting Twilight just to tell Spike to just breathe. Of course, even if she did, then he probably would have started hyperventilating anyway, so...
Yeah. But yeah, I think most of the stuff I've already mentioned in the story section in regards to what I think about how his character was handled in the episode. It was kind of a balance between the not so good Spike episodes and the good Spike episodes. I think that again that his initial concern was legitimate, but obviously he didn't handle it the right way. He handled it like someone who was a little new to this. And let's be truthful here. I know Spike has been around Twilight and the main six for a long time now, and obviously has learned a lot of lessons about friendship from them. But Spike really hasn't had a friend for himself until last season. I mean, Twilight's more like a sister to him, like an older sister. And the rest of the main six, well, yeah, I would call them his friends, or more kind of friends by proxy through Twilight. He hasn't really had a friend of his own, really, in the series or in his life. If he tried to relate to the dragons before in past episodes, and obviously that didn't work out so well, and went back to hanging out with ponies. He just really hasn't had many, if had any at all. And so now, last season, now he has friends, very direct friends, that he's made himself with Ember, the princess now of the Dragonlands Empire over there, as well as Thorax, who's now the king of the Changelings. And those are very direct friends that he made himself. It wasn't proxy through Twilight or anyone else. He made those friends himself. And so this is something I think that's new to him in a lot of ways. And I do think that Spike is legitimately worried about losing them. In a lot of ways, it's similar to Discord and how he feels about Fluttershy, his first and pretty much only friend. Here, Spike has two friends where he hasn't really had any of his own before. And getting those two friends together and really worrying that they're not going to get apart, I think it makes how he acts make a little more sense and be a little more believable. Whereas, of course, it's still an overreaction on his part, and he's still in the wrong. But it makes him puts a lot more weight on the situation for these to be his really first and best friends right now. And I think that's an important thing to view, because I think we've all been around Spike so much, and Spike's been around the main six so much that everyone just assumes that he's a master of friendship like Twilight, but I really don't think that's the case. I think he knows a lot about friendship, but I don't think he's had that actual, real-life, one-on-one experience with it, like Twilight and a lot of the other main six have had. So he's learning a lot about that in this episode, much like Discord has in his post-Reformation episodes. Yeah, and it's nice because it kind of shows he's growing up too. I mean, really, as I mentioned earlier, Spike has always sort of been the younger brother in the series. He's always been treated like it, butt monkey, jokes always go his way. He's always been shown to be really young, and Twilight's always treated him like a younger brother. And, he's always going around with Twilight and, friends with all of her friends and stuff, but not really a lot of his own. So it's a nice little subtle way of having him start to grow up, where now we're having episodes where he's taking a leadership position in these episodes, like Gauntlet of Fire, or in The Times They Are a Changeling, when he's actually actively standing up to everyone else and defending Thorax in that episode. And now in stuff like this episode, it just helps to show Spike is maturing and growing up and starting to do things on his own versus just being Twilight's lackey, as we had in earlier episodes, which is a nice progression for him over the course of the series. Yeah, I guess you maybe can do Big Mac, although we really don't see them ever hanging out outside of that, so it's kind of like a club. So I think there's some differences there where he's part of sort of a D&D club with Big Mac there, and was there someone else that was a part of that, or was it just him in Discord? I forget. It's been a while since I've seen that. But I think there's a difference between something like that and having some sort of group get together or club over a game like that every once in a while, and actually having like a legitimate, really good friend. I don't see Spike and Big Mac as being really close friends, especially since they're again bonding through proxy through Applejack and Twilight. I think it's more like it's also more like, what's the reason why they got together and do this? Oh, it's because Twilight and Applejack and the rest of them always go out on these grand adventures, and they've got to find something to do while they're gone. So that's kind of how they became friends. It wasn't like what happened in some of these other episodes. It's more like, well, we're both kind of left behind here. Let's play some, try and have some fun with it. So we don't really know exactly how close they are as friends. But even with that, it's just Big Mac and not like all these other new friends that Spike has gotten himself. And yeah, like I was saying, it's all about them sort of being left behind while Twilight and the rest of them go out and do stuff. But even with Big Mac, I still think the points kind of stand about this being a very new thing for Spike. And as we also mentioned earlier, just to put in the character discussion session here, Spike did successfully solve 2 friendship problems in the episode. So, I mean, that's showing some growth for him right there as well, at least from not a personal friendship perspective and having, your own friend and being worried about that, but at least learn enough from Twilight, being around Twilight and the main 6 and all the friendship problems they've solved and gone through, to actually be able to go over there and be an auditor in between, an arbitrator, between two friends that are having an issue there. How about Twilight and Starlight? Is there anything that anyone wants to discuss in terms of their characterization in the episode? Because they actually both of them played actually a pretty big part together.
I love how Ember, just for whatever reason, could not determine between the two of them. I mean, I can understand in terms of like maybe the coat colors somehow. I mean, the fact that Starlight is clearly more of a pink than a purple, but the fact that how she somehow manages to not notice Twilight's wings of all things.
Well, you know, she's new to the whole pony thing. You know,
Yeah.
dragons never really. I think that was kind of the point, is that dragons were never been around other creatures other than dragons.
Well, it makes sense considering that the dragon styles, the body shapes and sizes and colorations for dragons are so much more varied and so much more diverse
Yeah.
that has, compared to ponies. Pony kind are a lot more. At least compared to dragons, they basically can get away with saying that ponies look a lot, very very much alike.
And I think it also provides a little continuity as well, where in earlier episodes, like in Dragon Shy, where the ponies really don't know a lot about dragons, and dragons don't know a lot about ponies because they rarely ever interact, which is something that's been already set up in the series. Yeah, I liked how this episode sort of poked fun at a lot of a lot of things, like Ember saying, "Oh, you're basically the same, right?" Just a lot of like little tiny fun jabs at like fandom complaints and whatnot, and for those two. I did like how supportive they were of Spike. It really shows how much, especially Twilight, sort of trusts in Spike now, and how much he's done in the past with Gauntlet of Fire and in the Changeling episode last season as well. That her and Starlight actually kind of go out of their way to help Spike with this, and kind of put trust in him that maybe it's not really a good idea to get them together. And just being overall helpful to Spike in the episode. And plus, it was fun just to have another episode with Starlight taking a bigger part in it. Is there anything else for characters or characterization that anyone wants to mention about any character in the episode, or anyone that we missed?
Really can't think of anyone that we specifically overlooked.
Yeah, character-wise, it was a pretty small. We did get to see Lyra and Bon again. Lyra actually got a speaking part. They're having a little trouble in paradise there. Another little moment of Spike sort of taking after Twilight there, when he's looking for that friendship problem, and he sees them fight. He's like, "Yes, fighting!" It's a very Twilight thing to do when it comes to being set on what you're looking for or the task you're trying to accomplish, that you kind of lose sight of saying weird or offensive things like that. So yeah, I mean, I guess on that, on that topic, we get to the voice acting, and like I mentioned, we get to hear Lyra talk again briefly in there. We hadn't heard her talk since episode 100, a couple years ago, back in season 5, when her and Bon Bon had the larger part in that episode. So it was nice hearing Ashley as Lyra again there.
I was about to say that was the same voice that we heard, right?
Yep, Ashley Ball voiced Lyra, and Andrea Libman voiced Bon Bon, I believe, in episode 100. Bon Bon didn't talk in this episode, but of course, Spike getting starring role there. Kathy did a great job as that. It was great hearing, hearing, both, having Ember and Thorax back, but hearing Allie and Kyle as well back for those roles. I like both of their voices. I really like Thorax's voice. I think it's kind of a funny sounding voice, but I like it. Kelly Sheridan, he delivers so many great lines as Starlight every episode she's in. She just has this great semi-sarcastic style a lot of the times that I really enjoy. Again, another very small voice cast episode for this one. Not a lot more. With the exception of Ashley Ball showing up to play Lyra, everyone else was just the main ponies in the episode, and then any other subsequent voices that they may have had for, like a one-shot appearance character in that, or a background pony talking, was just done by one of the existing VAs for the episode. Yeah, I can't stress enough how much I like that scene between Ember and Thorax at the end there, when they're both sort of solving each other's problems. I think it was written really well and executed really well, and the voice acting between Kyle and Allie in that scene was also really good. I mean, you can just really feel the friendship growing and the ship fix being typed on the keyboard as that scene aired.
But to say, I can definitely see Thorax and Ember becoming a thing.
Embrex, which sounds like a medicine. It sounds like a medicine. If you experience an erection for longer than 4 hours after taking Embrex, please consult your medical professional.
I don't know. That sounds more kind of like a spin-off or a shoot-off of Anthrax to me. I poisoned someone on through the mail or something.
Never trust those dragons. Embrex actually is, it's not a medicine, but it is a medical device.
Really now?
Embrex, or I guess a company, Embrex Biodevices from. It's a device. Embrex Biodevices.
Oh, that is funny as hell. I never even would have thought of that.
The world's first commercial NOVO vaccination device. It really sounded like something like medical related. That's funny.
That is great.
Oh, gosh. So, moving on. What did everyone think about the humor in this episode? It had a lot of very good, like, situational character-based humor in it.
We did have quite a bit there. Like I said, we had the situation where Ember thought that, we had ponies kind of just decorate the walls with their favorite food, and then decides to just Shanghai Derpy's muffin and then just sort of splatter the wall over with it.
Yeah, Thorax being attracted to the light there, making it look like he was a pyro. Ooh.
And the very fact that he even also just not only was he attracted to it, but he also kind of got he wound up like curling up next to it as if it were like some gigantic fireplace.
Yeah. He's a bug, I guess. Attracted to light like that. Yeah, I guess in the character section, I completely forgot to mention Derpy's little scene in there as well, with her actually having a muffin there, and then Ember taking the muffin and smushing it on the wall. She just kind of gives this really concerned face and slowly backs away.
I'm gonna say just the constant culture clash that Ember has, trying to get along with the ponies and trying to figure out exactly how they do things. And whenever there's a fanfare upon her arrival, she looks like she's about to attack one of them before Spike even intervenes.
And he
Say then, of course, Ember brought to Twilight's castle, and then she's just more interested in eating the bowls and the walls and the actual food.
Yeah.
Give me a second. My dog's bothering me. I'll be right with you.
Okay. Yeah, her eating all the bowls instead of the food in the bowls and stuff. It's just like, oh man, I don't know how Spike controls himself either. That castle being all crystal, but yeah, there's a lot of great just kind of character and situational humor with revolving around Ember, trying to accustom herself to there and blowing fire and stuff when it might not be appropriate to put around ponies there. Yeah. We never really see Spike, obviously, actively solving those two friendship problems, being that that's not what the episode is centered around. So when we kind of get to the end of those and kind of he gives that little lesson at the end, it kind of had a little funny one, like with Lyra there, and, well, you should never let cupcake flavors get in the way of your friendship.
All right, sorry about that. Just had to run my dog upstairs.
That's fine.
Let's say we've had Ember just keeps sneezing. Apparently she's allergic to feelings.
That whole scene at the end with her attempting to express her feelings and really struggling to do it was pretty well done. I mean, Ali did a great job acting for that scene there.
Just super tsundere there. She's also apparently still not a fan of hugs. She awkwardly tolerates the greeting hugs that Spike and Twilight give her, but then when Thorax pulls her into a third one, she can only just respond with like a tired, really?
Not another one.
And then, Thorax just starts talking to Spike about his uncertainty with how to deal with some of the more renegade changelings and just ends up going for the full just Sigmund Freud approach.
I think one of my favorite lines was kind of a nice little subtle fourth wall break that Ember does. It's like, is this another part of pony friendship, telling each other what you've learned all the time?
That was a nice little subtle jab on that one. The whole, I don't know if we covered this one since, I had to step away, but the whole Thorax, getting, this castle visit's getting weird. Twilight really likes chairs.
That whole freaking chair scene. It's just like... And then you get, Twilight, sitting in the chair, getting comfy and stuff, and get all sorts of funny freeze frames from that scene.
As said, just Spike's just general first reaction to being called by the map is just simply to run around town asking everyone in sight, friendship problem? Friendship problem? Friendship problem? reactions range to just kind of being weirded out, to the one even running away, to one even diving into a hole just to get away from him.
Are you trying to seduce me, Miss Sparkle? So we got Starlight really likes kites and Twilight really likes chairs. I still love that line from that episode earlier this season. I really love kites.
And just going back to just remembering Ember just kind of trying to struggle to kind of talk about her feelings, to where she's like, her face is getting red. Just, I feel mad. That's all I've got, though, I think.
Again, the interaction between Thorax and Ember in that scene is like, wait, you're in charge? Oh boy, you need to be more assertive. Well, that's my problem. I don't know how. I tried asking them to please follow my directions. I even offered a prize. And then Ember's like, shh, stop talking. And that's how you do it. Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the whole reaction Twilight gets when Spike is called with a friendship problem. Oh, amazing! The map is really reaching out.
The light up Spine's and Spike action figure coming soon, only $19.95.
I love Starlight Glimmer's reactions and lines are good too. Like, Spike, are you here? Ember's eaten all of Twilight's decorations and, oh, hey, Twilight! A glowing map, glowing spikes. That's not good.
Wonder how you repair all those holes she ate in. I wonder if they're going to keep the continuity, keep all the holes in the walls. Probably not, but
I'm sure Twilight has a spell to fix it.
Oh yeah.
And also when Spike first leaves Ember with Starlight, and Ember comes back and starts eating stuff again, and Starlight just like does this almost like a face desk, which she just kind of puts her face down on the table there to like totally defeat it. With the animation and visuals, I guess the one thing I want to point out is I did like it. It was very brief, but I liked that little kind of daydream worry scene that Spike had when he was thinking about what would happen if the dragons and the changelings start fighting. It had a nice little art style, different art style to it.
Yes, it would become a red versus blue fight.
Yeah, the all the bugle players costumes as well there. Some nice designs there. So, anything else for humor or the visuals and stuff that anyone wants to point out that we may have missed before we move on?
I really can't think of anything specifically.
Oh, just all of Spike's antics were pretty funny. Yeah, that was good too, Technotron. One second. Okay, so just relaunch this here, and we will get to moving on to the music, the score of the episode. Oops. There we go. Okay. So yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the music and the score of the episode. Not actually a lot to talk about on this today. It was a little lighter episode on the on that. But there were some still some pretty cool little things in terms of continuity and motifs that I do want to point out. One of the main ones is obviously Thorax and Ember both return, but the cool thing is, of course, both of their leitmotifs that they've had in their previous episodes in Season 6 also return with them. Thorax has two returning themes. He has one that we hear earlier in the episode, and one little bit more mystical, I think, theme that we hear a little bit later. And Ember's theme also appears for her during the part of the episode with her and Thorax talking to each other. So it's nice to hear these themes returning in the series here. I think we hear Thorax's theme in this track first. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. That little theme there. We hear that one twice in the episode. That theme was originally used for Thorax when Spike first meets him back in the times they are a changeling. When he first meets them in that cave or whatever underground there in the cave. We first hear that for Thorax there. I think we hear it again in this track. A little more kind of. This one's kind of starts a little bit more kind of upbeat, almost like ragtime, certainly slightly silly one, as Thorax kind of goes around Ponyville and it has some antics with that, like when he goes up to the flame and is really interested in that. Wasn't that one? Let's see. We got the little fanfare here when Ember arrives from those bugles there. very much in the Dragons style there, with the very low timpani drum hits and the blaring horns. So let's see. I think we get... Oh yeah, here's the other one where we hear Thorax's theme again. This is when he's discussing the problem he's having with the rogue changelings in the Changeling Kingdom, when he's discussing that with Spike. Again, that very soft, mellow string and woodwind theme there. And Thorax is starting to freak out. And as we get to Ember's part there at the end, again, the more brass-heavy orchestration of the dragons comes back into play there. Well, that isn't specifically one of her motifs. It has the same, it has that same instrumentation. Next, we get a little bit of an action track when Spike's worst fears start happening and Ember and Thorax begin to fight. And then the scene where Thorax and Ember sort of reconcile, but then are angry with Spike for how he's been acting. Okay, so now we get to the last three ones, which are a lot of the bigger pieces. The first one is the track Thorax and Ember. This is the scene where Thorax and Ember are over by the lake there or whatever, and they're kind of talking and reconciling and teaching each other how to be better leaders. First, we hear Thorax's leitmotif, but this is his second leitmotif, different from the one we heard earlier. We heard this one in the same scene as we in The Times They Are a Changeling back in Season 6. The first one, the leitmotif we heard earlier, was before that flashback to Season 2 we had in that episode, and then this one appears after it. This one actually also appears in the Season 6, the Season 6 finale as well, at the end of the episode. After that, we get to Ember's theme, which you'll hear. It uses a pan flute, very indicative of Ember, and we heard this theme for her throughout Gauntlet of Fire last season as well. So it's really cool to hear both of these brought back for them. So not only having the characters brought back and their voice actors and everything, but also having their score and their leitmotifs brought back just adds a nice additional bit of continuity to the characters into the series as well. Here's Thorax's other motif here. It's a nice piano motif. And then, now here, we get into Ember's leitmotif here. more for Ember here. I kind of like what we did there at the end of the track there. This is when, after they've sort of both helped each other out and they're about to go and confront Spike again, we get Ember's theme again, or Ember's, at least her instrumentation on that part there. When it goes da-da-da, we get Ember's instrumentation with the pan flute, but then it shifts to more Thorax's instrumentation with the clarinet. Again, having them both used together like that to show how they've come together more as friends in that scene. From there, we get to the scene where Spike learns his lesson, apologizes, and the map says that the mission is complete. As we mentioned earlier in this episode, Triple Threat really, it's a map episode, but it's very different from other map episodes in a lot of ways, and most importantly in the structure of it. Usually map episodes, we start the episode with the ponies being called by the map to a specific location. We see them maybe traveling to the location. They get there, try and find the friendship problem, solve the friendship problem, and then it's solved, and the map says the mission's complete. Usually there's some, depending on how quickly they get into the location where the friendship problem is, there's usually some different themes that play for the map when they're getting called by it and whatnot. This episode obviously doesn't really have that because it doesn't have a lot of that structure to it. The map kind of just happens in the middle of the episode. They're already at the location where the friendship problem is happening. So we don't get to hear most of the map themes we normally do. But we do get to hear the one theme that has been in every map episode so far, and that is the Mission Accomplished theme that first appeared in all the way back in the Season 5 premiere when they first solved that friendship problem there. And it's pretty much in every other map-related episode for when the friendship problem is solved. And so you'll probably recognize it. It's nice to have a consistent theme and leitmotif for that, because you don't even have to see the cutie marks flashing. You hear this motif just auditory. A lot of times it's quicker. Your brain processes that a lot quicker than trying to find the cutie marks with your eyes. And so you automatically know what's going on in the scene. And so you hear that in this track here. First, we get through the part here where Ember and Thorax are trying their new leadership skills that they've taught each other. And now a little somber part for Spike apologizing. We should be getting to the map theme here. Should be right about here. And finally, we end the episode with Spike giving that speech about the presenting of the Dragon Fire Flame of Friendship to Ember and to Thorax there. For this, we hear a musical cue that we've heard before in the series, and I was looking for it for like 30 minutes on Sunday, and I couldn't figure out where we heard it last. But we've heard it in the series before, at least once, maybe multiple times, at the end of some episode. I feel like it was a scene where Mayor is talking to a crowd, but I've gone through like all the scenes I could think of and couldn't find it. I feel like it was something from one of the earlier seasons too, like season 1 or 2 or maybe 3, but I couldn't find it. But it's definitely a theme we've heard before in the series. Maybe you'll recognize it. If it was from season 1 or 2 before I started ripping the score, the people that I got the season 1 and 2 score from back then, Captain Comedy, Infinity Dash, Sean 555, etc., Mr. Newbie Doob, might not have actually ripped that part. So I might be remembering from an episode, but not be able to find it in my score collection if they didn't actually rip that. But I really feel like that was some sort of scene where we saw someone giving a speech to a crowd and they cheer at the end, just like in this episode. And I really feel like it was Mare Mare, but I couldn't find where it was used. It might not actually be some score that was previously ripped, and I might just have to rewatch some episodes to try and figure out where that was. But we definitely heard that before, and I feel like it's a really old theme, which we haven't heard for in a while. But I recognized it, nonetheless. But yeah, that was all the score. Again, not quite as much. We did have 12 tracks of it, but a lot of the tracks were really short for it. But it was really cool getting to hear Ember and Thorax's themes, leitmotifs, be reprised again. It's something the series does really well with characters and locations. If they give them a leitmotif, we do usually continue to hear that down the line for their reappearances, and I guess provides a nice bit of audio cohesiveness to the series, which I have always really enjoyed about it. So moving on from the music and the score, what does everyone think about this episode's theme and moral?
Well, basically the moral here is don't make assumptions based solely off of little to no information. You never know what's going to turn out, especially, regarding friends who've never met each other. So don't make assumptions, especially don't try to sweep the issue under the rug.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Pretty much. I don't have anything else to add.
You're not going to... Oh, go ahead.
Also an obvious, don't jump to conclusions.
Yep.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, you're not going to know how things are going to turn out unless you actually actively discuss it with them.
I don't think there was much dicks in this episode, Venher, actually.
Yeah, that's why I didn't go for my usual obvious.
It's always a good life lesson, but not from this episode.
Yeah, like it was mentioned, there really wasn't a whole lot to really mention on this, so...
So, what is everyone's favorite parts for the episode? Or worst fears, or worst parts of the episode?
Didn't really have any, worst fears or anything like that. I guess some of my favorite parts was basically just Ember, just trying to, understand a lot of things that just were totally foreign concepts to her.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe this episode could have been done better if, like I said, I like them adding the map into it. I think it upped the stakes a lot for Spike, and made his problem a lot more actual, hard to deal with. But I do think they deviated a little bit too much from the map thing. It just kind of seemed weird to me that Spike's getting called by the map for a friendship problem of himself that he doesn't solve, but it was really weird how it was done. I think they maybe could have worked that into the episode a little bit more, like maybe have Spike be the one who kind of initiates that eventually when they both yell at him and they go and have this talk and stuff. Maybe Spike could go there to apologize and kind of Spike be the one that kind of see how they can both help each other out, and then Spike is the one to initiate that. So he could have screwed up. He could have really worried that they wouldn't get along. But when he could see them actually getting along and talking it out, maybe he was the one who could have been able to jump in there and initiate them helping each other out. And then the episode could have been the same way then with Thorax and Ember helping each other out with that, but have Spike initiate that. At least that kind of makes more sense for the map, because then Spike would actually be working to solve the friendship problem. I think that would have made the episode a little bit better in terms of that. I just think they could have worked that into better a little bit, and then of course then you also have Spike being a little bit more actively involved in actually solving the problem rather than having like an Applejack moment. I didn't learn anything, so, sort of thing from there. Or in this case, I didn't really do anything. But Spike still, of course, did learn a lesson. My favorite parts, I loved seeing the chaos that the whole situation caused. Even if it's kind of a cliche sort of situation to be in, I think it was executed in a very kind of fun way, and I really liked seeing Ember sort of being out of place, and I loved seeing not only Spike but also Twilight and Starlight being able to, having to try and balance all this as well, and all the fun things that come from that. And I really liked Ember mistaking that, you both have, does everyone have lights in their name or something like that? You commented, like, all these characters have, like, Starlight and Twilight and stuff like that. It was a funny comment as well. A lot of the subtle kind of meta humor in it. Yeah, they seem to be kind of, trying to try some new things with the map this season. Again, with it calling Starlight and Royal Problem and Spike in this season. Hopefully we get some more traditional map episodes, although I'm not going to hold my breath on that. I do like the map episodes simply because it does allow them to pair two characters together, and you get a lot of really good character development between those two characters. And sometimes they can be characters that we don't always see together by themselves. Which is, I think, one of the strong points, as well as getting to potentially see new locations like Las Pegasus last season when we have the map episode. So I'd love to see something like that, because of course the map episodes this season have just been going to Canterlot and staying in Ponyville. So I'd love to see them continue to do that. But it's not, of course, absolutely necessary. So, final thoughts? Any conclusions? Any final things anyone wants to say about the episode? Overall feelings?
Decent overall. Not the best, but definitely not the worst. Always nice to see Spike in another role.
Yeah, not perfect. It's not an episode where Spike is, it's also not an episode like Gauntlet of Fire or Times They Are Changing where we really see Spike shine either. But it was really kind of a fun episode. I don't think it was as good as Joshua Hamilton's last episode with Parental Guidance, although I can see a lot of the comedy he wrote in kind of both of them being similar, and I do like that. Both of them being very enjoyable episodes to watch, even if you can critique them in some other ways. And really, that's kind of my biggest thing. I know other people might be a little bit more critical of things, or enjoy criticizing or analyzing, etc. Really, for me, my biggest thing is, did I enjoy watching the episode? That's like my number one. And not that other things don't matter, but that's like my number one thing. And I can legitimately say I really did enjoy watching this episode. And it wasn't one of those episodes either where it was, I know a lot of people complain about cringe or episodes being hard to watch, like Spike bombing, singing the anthem in Equestria games or stuff like that. Even though Spike was messing up here, I don't feel it was quite on the level of something like that. I don't like using the word cringe or saying scenes are cringe so they're bad or anything like that. But I in the defense, I don't think it was even at that level. It was very enjoyable sort of to watch all the antics and the way it was written in this episode. Yeah, overall enjoyable episode. Not quite as crazy as last week's, or as emotional as the previous week's. I'm not sure if this is going to be one of the most memorable ones of the season, but that's okay. It was still pretty good. Moral is Starlight and Twilight are the same pony.
Oh.
Well, with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Triple E and sticking around. I mean, we started a little bit later today. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and thanks for joining us for that. Of course, next week we will be back again on Tuesday. We should be back at 5 p.m. again next week, Eastern Daylight Time, here on CinemaQuestria.com. Next week's Triple E, we'll be discussing this weekend's new Season 7 episode, Campfire Tales, which is I feel is going to have a lot of cool stuff to discuss based on what I've seen so far. So make sure to join us this weekend as we live chat along with the episode and discuss it afterwards at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And join us next Tuesday for the next Triple E, where we will be discussing that. So definitely looking forward to that. It looks like it's going to be a fun episode. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining us, and hope you all have a great evening. Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care, folks.
Later, folks.